Welcome, everybody, joining us for this special research report, April 13th. We have 13 figures, and do not worry. Some of these are combined, but we had 13 questions come in, and Joe Estel loved the number 13. So I feel very honored to be here with, again, Dr. Zhaoyan Zhang, who is going to continue question and answer about his initial presentation. The presentation that, again, combined the goal of his voice research, which is a cause-effect understanding of voice production that links biomechanical properties of the vocal system and the produced voice outcomes. He is the biomechanical properties of the voice system. We are the voice qualities that we are going to connect together. We have the theory, we have the, again, practice, and this is the middle. Feel safe to ask questions. We're going to start with, and again, as every dynamical system knows, we are going to start with our question list, but please chat. We have people following them. And we will move along in a dynamical fashion during this wonderful Q&A session. Short bio. This is not even the long bio. Dr. Zhang is impressive, amazing. He is professor of head and neck surgery at the University of California, Los Angeles. His research focuses on how changes in vocal fold physiology affect voice production and how to infer vocal fold physiology from the produced voice toward clinical and other speech technology applications. He is a fellow of the Acoustical Society of America and associate editor for the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America. I was happy to connect with him at the Voice Foundation Symposium last June. I am excited because we spent days in the lab collecting data as well, and he put me through our vocal options for the figures and isolations, and he might even speak a little bit about that. So without further ado, Dr. Zhang, thank you for coming, and we are so happy to have you here, and we look forward to your continued discussion. Take it away.
Thank you, Kim. It's great to be back. So I can see that we have certain questions, but I would like to just start with a short summary of the talk I gave 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or 2 months ago. So I have a few slides for that. Okay, can you see the slides in here? It's the same title with the Q&A. Okay. So last time when I was here, so I talked about the focus on my research to establish a cause-effect relationship between vocal fold physiology and then the produced voice outcomes. We talk about the challenges in establishing such a cause-effect understanding in human and animal models, which is why that we turn to computational modeling, which allow us to change one thing at a time and isolate the effect of individual physiological controls. In the past, I have done a series of large-scale simulation studies in which I systematically varied vocal fold geometry, vocal fold approximation, stiffness, circular pressure, and vocal tract shape. So with this studies, we were able to identify that the which physiological controls has the largest impact on the voice outcomes. So we showed that the medial surface thickness in the vertical dimension has the largest effect size on the CQ, closed quotient, and also the NAQ, normalized amplitude quotient, which is a measure of how fast the airflow declines in the closing phase. We also show that the thickness again has the same dominant effect on the control of spider shape measures as well as CPP. So this shows that in addition to glottal gap in the horizontal plane as viewed from above, we have to pay more attention to changes to medial surface shape in the vertical dimension, especially when we are trying to, especially when we consider changes in producing different voice qualities. I also will talk about how changes in vocal tract configuration would impact the voice source. We have shown the effect of vocal tract configuration on the glottal closure and spectral shape is small. So here I would like to emphasize that by spectral shape, I mean the spectral shape of the voice source, not the voice produced outside the mouth, which of course it's heavily impacted by changes in vocal tract configurations. So which have a large impact on the sound pressure level and the spectral shape of the outside voice, and also the contact pressure between the vocal folds. So I also try to connect the findings from my simulation studies to the four big options of the true vocal fold body cover figure. So I argued that the these four options are actually can be viewed as four conditions in a continuum of thickness. So to summarize, so I think that the main message I'm trying to say is that the thickness control at the individual level is essential to voice quality control. And then we really have to pay more attention to how the medial surface shape is controlled as we produce different voices styles. So I think that would be a short summary of the talk I gave last time. And with that, I would happy to answer questions. So.
And we can start with those we received. And I'm so glad, although Helen Rosen, I think you're ill, I can start with your questions there you are, Helen. I would love to continue with, again, you started with stiffness versus tension. You talked about glottal shape and AP stiffness and covariations. And so let me take us to our Estel figure for true vocal fold body cover, which we know is, again, based on the theory, the Vandenberg, the Hirano, the studies that you use for your models. And we have our thick, our thin, our stiff, and our slack. So this is a big question, and Helen can jump in. So as far as relating your simulations and models to our Estel voice model, what can you continue clearing up the difference between stiffness, tension, and then we can have a discussion of how does that fit into our true vocal fold body cover figure. So
Okay.
Helen, anything, did I get that? Did I, yeah.
Okay.
I came back from, I told Dr. Zhang, I came back from Los Angeles last week with no voice, coughing. So I understand.
Well, she did not get that from me. So,
Oh,
okay.
I was. Oh, yeah, I was.
Or could be, yeah. So to answer the questions, so I think I have a few slides. So I'm going to share again the screen. So going back to my talk. So here, so it's the wrong one. So this one. So So this figure shows that, say, imagine if you can, say, take the work folds out, if you can stretch it, shorten, stretch, shorten during this cyclic, which we call the mechanical testing, which is how we can measure how stiff the work folds are and then how much tension in the work folds. So this figure shows that the tension, which is the force that we need to elongate the folds as a function as how much we elongate the folds. So the y-axis, that's tension. So it is a force. And then if you can see the red line, dashed line, that's essentially it's a tangent to the tension elongation curve. So essentially just a slope. So that slope is, we call that stiffness. So so stiffness normally it's a property of the material. It has nothing to do with, how much force we apply to it. So which is normally the case when we have a linear material. But then, of course, for the work folds, we call it nonlinear in the sense is that as we elongate, apply tension, you can see the slope would go up, which means the stiffness would also increase with tension. So both contribute to how we control the F0. So normally that tension has a larger contribution at when the work force is elongated, especially at high pitch. Stiffness also has a role. I think it's as important as tension. But then the thing is that when the work force is at rest, meaning that it's not elongated or shortened. I mean, when it's not elongated, in which case the tension can be zero or even negative, as in the case when we try to produce work of y. So in which case tension is negative. So in those conditions, stiffness has the more important role in terms controlling F0. So I know that people often don't differentiate these two, but then I think it is important from engineering point of view, especially that essentially it's two different mechanisms at high pitch, low pitch. So hopefully I think that would explain the question about difference between stiffness and tension, right?
Helen, chat or voice? You're muted.
I cough from time to time, that's all. No, yeah, I think I'm having trouble with the actual mechanics and the engineering of understanding. On one hand, that's me not being able to understand everything you say because there's parts of it that my brain has to absorb over time. What you the actual meaning of what you're saying. But I'm thinking that if you're saying stiffness is something that takes place when there's no activity, it's when there is no elongation, when there is no tension,
Yes.
which kind of figures with our figures because tension would be introduced, say, by by tilting the thyroid, which is kind of like the opposite to what happens when stiffness is introduced by supposedly the arytenoids making the movement that they make in order to introduce the stiffness into the fold. So that kind of figures. I don't think I really understand the mechanics of what you were saying. I'd have to hear that quite a few times before it actually computed for me, I think. But it does help. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe we could talk afterwards. So I do want to know what's the best way to explain this to you because this is important to me as I try to reach out to singing teachers.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
It's
I mean I have to learn to use your language in a way, so I'm trying. And you could help me with that. So
yeah, I think I'll listen back to the recording and listen to your explanation again a few times. But I'm understanding it on I understand something more than I understood before. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, is it important to understand the difference to be able to sing better? I don't think so, because often that tension and stiffness, they co-vary. So if you increase tension, stiffness will also go up. So I think that's,
No, I don't think you need to
which is
understand
okay.
it.
Sometimes they just mix the two. So it's only that when we say, for people like me, say I'm trying to understand, okay, why at certain conditions you can say increase F0 without changing workfold length or thickness, then we have to isolate each individual potential mechanisms that can change F0. So it's only in those occasions then we do have to differentiate. So
No, not for singing better, but yes, to explain better our own
explain better.
figure
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I ask everyone here because Helen, I equate the lengthening or AP tense, tell me if I'm right, AP tension of thyroid tilt, right? We said that would be tension, but I would call a retinoid rocking also a force which again contributes, correlates with tension. However, our word that we use in Estel voice training, I'm getting all this, my brain is going, all the words we use in Estel voice training, stiff folds. And in the recording, so when we were collecting protocol, we were even, you said, I don't know if we need stiff folds. And I said, well, I think we need stiff folds, whether they're stiff physically, or whether it is glottal angle, right, or glottal gap or configuration. So are we explaining that breathiness by gap or tension? And I believe both elongations, whether it's a retinoid rocking posterior or thyroid anterior, would, in this case, in this like engineering case, go to tension. Our stiffness is this. So when we go back and forth there, I think we're trying to help our singers with what is the auditory percept, which is breathiness, right? Breathiness in some form, harmonics to noise ratio, which you did find some covariations H to N2 at the level of the vocal fold. Helen, am I wrong? Are we trying to like we call it stiff because there was, again, in the early films, it looked stiff and tight, but you're saying stiff and tight are two different properties. I went in a circle here. Sorry about that. And anyone can chat to help me.
Yeah, I think probably the problem is with the word stiff, which,
Yeah.
if, what does it mean then if the arytenoids rock back and out, and that's what presents the vocal folds in the open position, even though they're vibrating? If that introduces tension, what does stiffness mean then in our parlance? Why are we using that word?
Yeah.
And when the doctor was using it to in the first talk, I thought he was using it kind of concurrent with tension, meaning the same thing, and that's what I wanted to clear up really. What do you mean by it, and what do we mean by it when we use the word stiff?
If I may add, so I think that in the clinic there is no way to measure stiffness or tension. We did it before, but then it's hard. So I think that if you hear doctors say, it's stiff, I think it's more like say how it looks like stiff or it sounds like stiff. So we have no idea. So
there's just something else that's just occurred to me, that is that stiffness could have referred to the lack of mobility of the mucosa on the muscle itself. In that when if the arytenoids make that adjustment, does it actually mean that the mucosa doesn't vibrate as much. It just doesn't have the same gliding movement. So that's what's being stiffened rather than the fold, the whole fold itself is
Well,
this movement. The
yeah,
free movement of the mucosa on the muscle is somewhat challenged, and so you get low harmonics and you
right. Well, I think that so all all else being equal, if you increase stiffness, it's gonna reduce the vibration amplitude. And I think that it will also reduce this wave motion or the phase difference. I mean, vertical phase difference. So I think that's yes. But then I think that in the human case, so I think that I started with that. So the reason that we choose to do simulation is that in humans, many things they often co-vary. So when we say stiffen the folds, so if we are only thinking about the intrinsic muscles, so normally you have to elongate that. But then the sense is that when you do that, so here that if you can focus on the top of the slide, so normally that's when you elongate that, you would also stiffen the folds because when you elongate that, that would engage the collagen fibers inside the work folds. That would make the work folds stiff in the AP direction. But then you'd also engage the increased stiffness along the medial lateral direction. And then same time, so it also would reduce thickness. So the sense is that, so I think that what I talk about in my talk is from my simulations, which were designed to intentionally decouple those things, so we can see the effect of those individuals. Say if we only change thickness, if we only change stiffness, what would happen to the voice? So I think that the reason I do that, I think, is that I think that the mapping from the stiff stiffness, length, thickness to the voice, I think that's universal, or in other words, it's speaker independent. So we need to understand this first, and then after this, we try to understand. Okay, in humans, how do we control workfold length, workfold stiffness, thickness, and then when we try to control that, how those things co-vary. So I think that it's by doing these two steps we can understand, why, say, in the human case, say in the Asto model, when we go to stiff, it's often just opens a little bit, and also the work folds are relatively thinner compared with thick or snack. So I think that's it's important to remember that this talk is about trying to understand the universal mapping from the biomechanics to the voice, and then we try to use that in interpret how what we observed, what we experienced in human phonation, which is that the my next goal. So as I mentioned before, so right now we have a pretty good understanding of how intrinsic muscles controls the length, stiffness, thickness, and by controlling that, introducing covariations. I think that one thing that, I mean, at least I don't quite understand is how extrinsic muscles, say you were talking about thyroid tilt, quadriceps tilt, they may introduce different kind of covariations between the length, thickness, stiffness. So I think that's, which is why singers, they can do things that normal people cannot do. I mean, they know they know how by doing this they can get to a certain spot. So this is a long answer. I hope that
No, I think we got
clarifies
two
things.
two parts here. Also, your simulations are one mass model, right? So the simulations, are they all one?
Well, it's a continuum model, which means you can interpret that has almost infinite number of masses, which is why it can show this wave motion and then incomplete closure. So it's continuum.
It is continuum. Okay. Then our you last time said it's all a variation of thick to thin, which gets to our word stiff. I think we are again the connotation is noise in the signal, whether it's a lot of breath noise or not. And I think you introduced, and when we were recording, was more about glottal angle, like you said, keeping how, and we see the gap being very large or smaller when asked on scope to go to our stiff folds. We've seen that. We've seen the
Right.
folds not be stiff at all. They're actually very like pliant, but the gap is so wide that we hear he. So I think there's more to it. Our stiff folds seems like, would you say this? And I admit again, this is to bring theory to application, that perhaps our stiff fold, the closer correlation might be with glottal angle in your model. The sound.
It is possible. It is possible.
Okay.
See, you can do it in two ways. You can do it
Okay.
with large gap, or you can do it with extremely thin folds. So this is that when we change the gap, we normally do it with LCA-IA muscle, which normally does not change stiffness much. But then when we change thickness, when we go to extremely thin, then we do have to stiffen the folds. So there are two ways we can do that. So one way is to increase the gap, but then the folds does not have to be stiff. So in that case, then maybe we should not call it
Stiff fold. Right.
Right.
Like there is something here
Right.
as we evolve,
Exactly.
right?
The other way would be that to indeed actually stiffen that, but then in order to stiffen the folds, it also make the folds thinner. So I think that's two ways to do it. So I think gap is important, obviously, because the gap has to be small. Otherwise the work folds will not vibrate. So gap is important as we go from breathy to model. But then as we go from model to final one, pressed or thicker, I think that's thickness. So well, I mean, at least that's showed from the simulations. So
And everybody in our Estel world knows that we've had to, again, in training Estel stiff folds, what do we say? It has to get softer, lower, right? At a lower FO, it has to get softer, knowing that we could, we could keep that breathiness. So we are specifying and asking for certain configurations and perhaps stiffness. And this is, again, going to help move the model forward. So thank you. We spent a lot of time on this, but everyone knows here that we're here for that reason. This parts of the model are, again, more evident than others, and testing and evolving in the future. This is going to really help connect our body cover figure with biomechanics, with the acoustics, and with the percept. I have more questions, but we have people here. Is there anybody in the chat? I'm not again, I'm terrible. So I'm looking here. We have Simone who just asked, and then we have some other chats or any other question here. I'm going. let's go with Leon first. Dr. Zhang, do you see Leon train? So he's said, Leon, do you want to ask? Yeah, it's yeah, because you speak in a different language. Just kidding.
English, yeah.
Oh, English. That was my joke for April the 13th. Not funny.
I also have a cough. It's a great fun thing to do. Just post 5 days, the post 5-day cough, I feel. My question was about when we're describing and we are articulating what it is in terms of length, mass, and tension, is there a fourth dimension? Because relative to Helen's point as well about, we talk about stiffness in terms of body cover condition, but we don't necessarily combine it with length, mass, and tension. So should we be thinking about it in that context as well, that it's length, mass, tension, and stiffness? Which is part one of my question. The second part of my question, which was the second question I wrote, which was about approximation and about adduction. And there's long been conversations in dark Estel corners at symposia and summits about arytenoid figures and the possibility of that, and whether or not this is where the model may be heading in terms of an update, and that perhaps what we're looking at with Dr. Zhang's work is that there is a more complex dynamic between whether or not we're actually looking at stiff fold, or we're looking at, as Kim, as you were alluding to just then, a sort of breathy thin or a breathy thick. So then there's, because we hear it in pop music, we hear it in jazz, we teach it, we coach it, we, you know, all the time we're hearing it. And sometimes it's there because of pre-existing pathology, and sometimes it's there because of genre choices or stylistic choices. And so I think it's a question that comes up often, and especially in the actor's voice as well, when we use the model really specifically to look at character choices, and students are using onset to describe tonal quality. So they're saying, oh, I'm using aspirate onsets. I'm like, oh, you're using aspirate tone or breathy tone, but it's not included in the model. And it's definitely a facet that is that comes up often on 5 days and in coaching and within sort of larger educational settings. So that was my question, was sort of manifold. Sorry about that. But okay.
Okay. So let's see if I can remember the question. So I guess the first question is that, so should we add the stiffness? I mean, so should we include both tension and stiffness? I think that it would be nice to add one figure like the figure I showed early in the Estel book, but I don't see that's why we need to add that. You know, when you try to teach students how to do that. As I mentioned, that often tension and stiffness, they often co-vary. So I think that it will be helpful to just explain in the book, you know, that the stiffness plays an important role when we go to, say, vocal fry, something like that. But then tension is more, you know, important that. But then, you know, they don't need to understand that to be able to, you know, make those figures. So I think that's my answer to question number one. And then number two, I think that's your question is that if we need to add another figure for the true workflow body covers, say the one that's just one for breathy voice. I think that might be a good idea to just add that, you know, so we have a gap to differentiate from the stiff folds when it's produced. I mean, my understanding is that the stiff figure is produced with thin folds stiffened, so which does not necessarily have to have a large gap. So I think that breathy voice is that you may not have a lot of harmonics, but then you have a lot of noise. But then stiff, you may not have a lot of noise, but then you don't have as many harmonics, which would give the same. I mean, it's more like weak. You know, some people would say it's weak. So so I think that might be something that's you know, to be considered in the future if you're thinking about expanding that. So and also the thing is that I'm not trying to say gap. It's completely not important. You know, I mean, of course we do have to approximate folds to phonate. So yeah.
Important in our teaching and addressing, because as Leon knows, we go, oh yeah, you were breathy, but that's not estal stiff, right? That's not estal falsetto. We're always at that. Okay, you were. So it is kind of bringing that theory to the application, which also right here, Simone, do you want to add on to your question? Simone from, she's in Montreal right now, I think.
Yes,
But
yeah, in
it's an
Montreal, yeah.
Aussie, a different language too. So many different languages.
Right, we get all the accents today. So it's just as the question is in the chat, in Estel, we talk about the idea of a plane change between one end of your continuum thick and then the other end potentially stiff. So, and certainly the kinesthetic awareness for myself, other colleagues, and students is that feeling of a flip or a sort of plane change in a yodel-like quality between a thick and a stiff fold when it's abruptly changed, whereas that's often not the case, or cannot be the case between an abrupt change between thick and thin. And so I'm just interested to know, I know kinesthetic perception is maybe out of the realm, but I would be really interested to understand why it is that we perhaps feel that sensation of plane changing, opening up, closing down, between those abrupt shifts from one end of the continuum to the other.
I think this question is the perfect example of why I need to talk with you. So I have to understand the question. So my answer is that I really don't know, because I think it's like out of my area. So I think that to answer that, I have to say actually experience that, this plane change. So I mean, the
Yeah.
sense is that when you go from say thick to thin, of course you could do many ways. You could use intrinsic muscles or extrinsic muscles. So and I guess you are not talking about register change, right? It's not, right?
Well, it can be, but it can be just on the same note. Anyway, sorry, Kim, you're the expert here.
Kim, help me out.
This is why we're working together. Yeah.
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
so in our attractor state dynamical theory, we don't discuss register shifts as that. We know they are abrupt shifts in attractor states, but we also practice keeping the same mix or recipe throughout the entire FO range. So Helen's cheap. She's not buying anything. She said, I don't buy the rock. She was always cheap. I think if we go into aerodynamics now too, this is just all, again, where this is a wonderful place to go, hey, what about this? It seems like, Dr. Zhang, if I do super abrupt changes, that is also aerodynamics, and you're feeling that big shift, but you can have a yodel. I just yodeled from R estal thick to thin. It wasn't that huge, the difference perceptually, I feel. So I think we're feeling perceptually, we know we feel little change. Otherwise, when we'd swallow, sensory receptors would feel like, oh, it's coming together. Oh, both would feel everything. But we do feel abrupt, big changes in aerodynamics and even temperature. So yeah, Helen, I think that is that question about why we feel it. Then we add here, which is my question, subglottic pressure is part of the article we read. So you were mostly biomechanical, and then you brought aerodynamic. You brought physiologic changes and then aerodynamic into the same process when subglottal pressure, they all co-vary. So I think that's where I go. Yeah, Helen, I was chatting and speaking the barometers, yes. And we feel, changes in pressure. And when you do that thick stiff, whatever that is, if you're going really wide glottal angle or gap, you are going to feel that barometric change as well. But add it to the list, everyone here, who has the research brain. Right. We have more questions. Anyone here that wants to ask may again ask. And also, I'm so glad, Dr. Rommel, Stephanie, you are here as well, who have been combining and researching too. Do you have comments for us? Because it's wonderful to have us in the room where it happens. And this, anything to add to this true vocal fold body cover when you've been adding the source and the MRI, and we can't wait to hear more too at our Estel Voice Symposium in Vienna.
Yeah.
So I just want to add something.
Yes.
Sorry, Stephanie. Yeah. So I think that what you just said makes sense. You know, say imagine if you just open the open up the globus, it's gonna so it's gonna change the airflow. I mean that the airflow is gonna rush out, and then we do have pressure sensors in the vocal folds. I think that would it might introduce some. We try to control the subglottal pressure. So the question is that it's just how fast it changes that. Is it that the sensation you feel is purely aerodynamic, or it's maybe or involves feedback? I think that we should be able to model that, to see that if we just sudden change of that, and then how much of pressure effort change, and then if we can feel that, so that's a good question. So
Also, I just thought of something. Our thin fold is actually tense, right? So in your engineering model, if you read the paper, your highest FOs, you found the highest correlation with AP tension, correct? And thin folds at the highest note. We are, again, combining the engineer words. Now, everyone, don't go crazy, this is right. But if we do it with the engineering application, then we should call thin tense, if you know what I mean. We're not doing it, but because again, using these words in the engineering principles, thin is tense, stiff is glottal angle. You know what I mean? In our Estel world. Sorry about that, everyone. Just keep that there. And then I was going to introduce Stephanie. And again, Stephanie, anything to add to this complex but fun?
From the discussion, what I hear is that stiffness and stiff have different meanings in some way. And I think if we look at from that way and look what in English terms stiff means, maybe we have to rethink on how we name it in some way. If you look at the biomechanics. But as for the full vibration of how the vocal folds work, for me, the most interesting thing is also to see it in human beings. I think it's very important, Dr. Zhang, that we have the possibility to do it in biomechanic and really look at one simple one parameter at a time, because that makes it more easy, because it's quite complex. And I believe what Leon says. I believe that there are much more complex movements of the true vocal folds, and I'm looking forward for MRI studies on the vocal folds where you can really see the vibration. And I think we're getting there, that the resolutions are so good that you really can see. And how about it could be like the vocal folds are open in the middle, or at the end, or at the front, And so for me, it's more about where it's about airflow, how much air we get through. For me, it's about tension. I love tension very much, and I'm looking forward for MRI. Yeah.
I'll agree. So I have read the papers by the German group. I think that you may be involved. So I think that they showed that they were able to actually just image the vocal fold medial surface during one cycle as people talk, which is exactly the same that I would like to do. So I think that I would love to just go to Germany, or work with you since you have the data. So my question is that I have seen this effect of the thickness on the voice production, but then it's a simulation. So it would be great to actually see that validated in humans. So I think that's great. We are trying to do the same thing here, but then so you have done it.
We can talk about that on in future time.
Some other time, yes, yeah.
I'll connect you and yeah.
Thank you.
And also the new technology to view deeper into the folds. What is it called? You told me and I wrote it down and I forgot.
OTC, I think.
Yes.
OCT, optical coherence tomography. So
Optical coherence tomography. Tell them about that. Another way to view. Yeah.
well, so essentially that. So I have been. I mean, I gave a talk at the University of Southern California. So they have a group of people. They have working on this technology. So they have been able to fit this sensor into a flexible scope, so they can just go through the nose and then they can see that. So this technology is able to penetrate the vocal folds about 2 millimeter deep. So essentially, so they can see that the things that we cannot see normally. Say if you use a scope, you can only see the surface. Now they can go under the
Deeper.
surface. Yeah, and then so if we focus on the closing phase, that would actually allow us to measure the vertical thickness. So I think that's also one way. And then of course, I think that's the limitation is that it can only penetrate for 2 millimeter. But then the good thing is that it has super high spatial and temporal resolution. So essentially, can just do it real time as we talk. So I think that's great. Yeah, that's one thing to go. So but then I think that we have a lot of questions that's that can be answered by imaging. So using these OCT or MRI or CT. So
Any questions from the group? I can go down the list. Oh, did I miss a chat? Oh, yeah. Leon agreed. The exciting about different glottal angles, right? We do have a question. A couple of questions were about, we've been studying the source and now you're adding filter properties, right? So like I know, and the nonlinear interactions,
yeah.
when you do that, how far are we? What have you found so far? And understanding that, we have to start small. You ask your questions, we're starting with the source, and love that the source has been ignored, even though it's called the source, right? Dr. Zhang, like you've said, we have Vandenberg way back in the day, and we know all of this, but we're not really applying that. When Estel are trying, so that is important too. But what about the interactions, and how confident are you with modeling when we add vocal tract?
Sure. Yeah. So so I think that the computational study I did is unique in one way is that I have ran the simulation for 300,000 conditions. So so it spans a large range of pressure, stiffness, thickness, gap, vocal tract shape. So with this many conditions, so it allows me to capture the global effects rather than local effect that's only true for a few conditions. So the sense is that I think the importance to focus on global effect is that if it's global, then everybody can make use of it. Then you don't need training to be able to fine tune your vocal fold, vocal tract to take advantage of this effect. If it's local effects, that means you will need to training to just look for that. So, okay. So going back to the question is that, so I have run simulation where I systematically change the vocal tract configuration. So the findings, why I say that the change in walk track configuration, its effect on the global closure pattern and spectral shape is small. It's that globally see, if we if we see that across a large condition, it's really the impact is small. So, but then of course, if you just zoom into a specific condition, when say the F0 approaches F1, then the impact is large. So, so the question is that in between, I think there were a lot of discussions saying if you squeeze the epilarynx, you can enhance the source tract interaction. The question is that how much enhancement is that? So I think that when you squeeze the epilarynx, the improvement would be reflected mainly in the performance. So many years ago, we have done a study. We use physical model, silicon-based physical model, and also excited energy. So we showed that many of the source tract interaction, the impact on the voice source is large only when the F0 approaches one of the resonance. So one-to-one entrainment. It's possible, but then when it's away from the performance, then the impact is small, especially on the closure pattern spectral shape. Now, if you are familiar with my work, so I think that the workflows, the maximum, how we start this workflow vibration is that we use the L flow to, I'm gonna use engineering terms now. So we are gonna use L flow to synchronize two workflow modes to vibration. So the workflows, it's continuum, so meaning that it has infinite number of modes. So now it is possible that at a certain condition, when you introduce the walk track or change some configuration in the walk track, it can induce some irregular vibration, say subharmonics, especially when we try to go from one state to the other. Normally, say, okay, if we try to go from one attractor state to the other, so as we go, at some point, we will come across a boundary between those two attractor states. So in that condition, so a small disturbance, either introduced by noise or walk track configuration, it can induce the workflow vibration change from one mode to the other, from regular phonation to subharmonics. And then as we further go, then the subharmonics will transition back to regular phonation. So it is possible. So and we actually observed that in my simulation. But then the things that in general, so as I showed in my study, as I systematically introduce constrictions to different locations along the walk track, the average effect is small. So I think that's good news, because that means we could find ways to use inverse filtering to find out those things. So hopefully that I try to be thorough, and I don't want to offend people with this. So.
Do we have any final questions or comments for Dr. Zhang? This has been, once again, enlightening and TBD, to be, oh, not C, TBC, to be continued, TBC.
Well, I do want to add one more thing, so I think it might be interesting. So, okay, so I'm gonna show a few slides. Remember that we have a question. I don't know which one I'm showing. Maybe this one. Can you tell me what is, okay, it's here.
Let's see.
I think I show this here. Okay, going back here. So I think that I was trying to argue that, that's the for figures, the true workfold body cover, they can fit into this continuum. I think one question I'm not so sure about is that, so I have here that too small, too large, conversational. So I'm not so sure how these four figures would fit into the, if I can show that. So how this four would fit into this scale. I think the order is correct, but I don't know, especially the thick and thin, how would fit into that. My feeling is that the thick and thin, they both fit into here, conversational. Stiff maybe here, and then the slack is there. So I'd like to show some data we connected 2 weeks ago. I think that's one of the Astro trainers. She tried to produce for okay.
He killed me. Wait a minute. Let me just say 2 pitches, 2 vowels, and isolate. Okay. Yes. So we're going to do false
Yeah,
vocal
that's
fold.
a lot
Isolate
of
with
data.
wide, with narrow, with
Right.
thick, with thin, with stiff, constrict, and then slack doing all of these. So it was fun.
So I think that data will be extremely useful to me, and then hopefully I think will be useful for training teaching. So especially that, I mean, we had fun when I had to quiz Kim to ask her to tell me what's each sound is, what figure she used to produce each sound. So I play back the recordings and then ask her to see if she was able to identify the figures she used. So she was good. So I think that, I mean, the same thing, can be used in teaching. You could just use the same data, ask them to see if they can perceive that. I think that if they cannot perceive that, then I guess it will be hard for them to produce that. So, okay, so back to the point that, if you can, this one is 4 productions. So you can see on the top, it's the mid for the false votes with AES. This one's C4. So 4
Yeah. Woo.
true workfold conditions. So if you can focus on the bottom panel showing the EGG, so you can see that we can see the stiff is quite different from the thick and thin. So to me, that shows the stiff fold is really thin fold. But then you can see that the thick fold, it's indeed, I think the CQ is slightly higher than thin. But then how much higher? It's probably not that much. So I think the point is that I'm trying to make is that I think the thick and thin, they may both fit in the middle of the continuum of the thickness. So another thing you can see that is, in humans, we never change one thing at a time. So you can see the function also. So I think it would be great, to better understand, how each figure fit into the continuum of thickness. I think that would be something to do in the future. So that's all I want to share. So.
Pretty.
Thank you.
So do you see that? Yes, mid false fold, then constrict false vocal fold, narrow AES, thin
A
fold,
lot of data,
E
yeah.
and C and thick,
I'm
and then
excited, yeah.
and again the perceptual study. I was the judge, but we have that to share with others too, and run those just like Joe's original studies. Did I produce them successfully when I play them for novice listeners and expert listeners? So there's so much there, and it was fun, to add to the stress, the performance anxiety. And I was healthy then. It was after, very interesting. It was after that I got a little. So thank you again. Any other comments? I just think it's wonderful to have you as a resource, and reach out to any of us at any time. Hello to everyone who will watch this on the recording, because we know many people RSVP'd. We understand about times throughout the world. Come to Vienna. It waits for you in August. So would love to see everyone to discuss more. We have research, we have education, we have performance, as usual with our special ESTA Voice training group. It is my honor to be your peers and to sit with you in this really interesting discussion. On the research end, I love to apply it, the translation, and thank you, Dr. Zhang. Thank you, everybody
My
who
pleasure to be
attended.
here. So yeah.
Any other housekeeping? I usually forget something. Carter, Corinne. Very good. Have a happy April 13th.